Have you ever sat down to write something in Obsidian and you just end up staring at that blinking cursor? There's actually a name for this. It's called blank page syndrome, and it completely zaps your creative energy. Now, one of the best ways to overcome this is to use a template to get started, which is basically a pre-built note or file that follows a pattern to help you get unstuck and start moving that cursor across the page. But templates are not just for copying text. They can also be productivity forcing functions, and they make sure that you capture data the right way every single time. Today, I'm going to show you how to use those templates in a variety of ways inside your Obsidian Vault, explain how tokens and variables work, and I'll share a bunch of practical examples that you can use to give your Vault an instant upgrade. Now, this video is part of my Obsidian Basics series, and it's intended to be a walkthrough of the most valuable ways to use templates for new users. So we'll start pretty basic, and then we'll work our way up to some advanced features in community plugins like Templater and QuickAdd. But I'm gonna focus on the stuff that's gonna provide the greatest benefit to the highest number of Obsidian users. So if you want a really deep dive into everything Templater, for example, this video is not it. But if you want real life examples of practical ways that templates can benefit your Obsidian Vault and your PKM workflows, this video is for you. Now, by the way, all of the template examples that I'm gonna share in this video are also included in my free Obsidian Starter Vault. So instead of trying to recreate these yourself, just head over to vault.practicalpkm.com and download them. All the template files are inside of a separate templates folder inside that Starter Vault, and you can just copy over the template files that you wanna use into your current Vault if you want to modify and use them. Now, before we get into how to use templates though, let's discuss briefly what templates do and how they can be useful when you use them inside of Obsidian. So templates are basically text snippets that you can insert into your notes, and using templates gives you a couple of big benefits. So first, it makes sure that your formatting is consistent and that things always get created the same way. So if I manually type something like a property name or a tag every time I add it in a note, there's a good chance I'm gonna mistype things and that property or tag is not going to get applied correctly, messing up the data that I may be storing in my Vault and making it impossible to find in the future. But when you use a template, the text gets created exactly the same way every single time, and it eliminates the possibility of human error. As long as it's correct in the template file, it will always be correct when you use it in your notes. Now, the second benefit that templates give you is that you don't have to start from scratch whenever you create something new. By using a template, you can make the task significantly easier, and you can even use templates to kickstart the creative process. So for example, my newsletter follows a very specific format that I've refined over the years that I've been sending it. I have a newsletter template that I use in Obsidian when I start to write the newsletter, and having the sections in the appropriate places eliminates some of the resistance that typically comes with sitting down to write. But the biggest and most immediate benefit that comes from using templates is that it simply saves you a lot of time. Anytime you find yourself typing the same thing over and over, you should consider turning that manual process into a template. The principle I use for this is the 3 times rule. So if I find myself typing the same thing 3 separate times, then that's my cue to spend some extra time to create a template that I can use in the future. Now, this same principle applies more broadly to automation in general, where if you find yourself doing the same thing over and over, then that is a great opportunity to automate that process. Templates are essentially just a very basic form of automation, and the fact that Obsidian sits on top of a folder full of markdown files means that templates are actually very powerful. They can do quite a bit to supercharge your Obsidian workflows if you understand how they work. So let's get into creating and using templates, and let's start with the basics by talking first about the built-in Templates Core plugin. The Templates Core plugin lets you insert predefined snippets of text into your active note, and you can toggle it on by going to Settings, Core Plugins, and toggling on the Templates option. There are some simple settings for this core plugin that you can configure by clicking on the gear icon. The first of which is the location for your template files. I recommend you keep all your templates inside of a templates folder inside the root folder of your Obsidian Vault. But you can keep these somewhere else if you really want. It's just important for this plugin that we set the templates folder in the settings here so that when you go to apply a template in Obsidian, it knows where to look for those template files. You can also configure the date format here, which is what will be used when you use the date placeholder by using the word date inside of double curly brackets inside of a template file. By default, this is set to year dash month dash day. And while you can change this to something else if you really want, I generally recommend you keep this as is unless you have a reason to change it. Same thing with the time format option, which configures how the time gets displayed when you use the time variables inside of a note by putting time inside of double curly brackets. By default, the time format is hour, minute. And again, I recommend you leave this unless you really have a reason to change it. If you do want to change it, you can see the options that are available by clicking on this format reference link. Okay, so those are the settings. Now to use the Templates Core plugin, you just open up a note, you invoke the command palette, which is Command P on Mac or Control P on Windows, and then you select the Templates Insert Template command. This will open up a list of templates from the files that are in the folder that you designated in the settings, and to insert a template, just select it from the list and hit the Enter key. The template will be applied at the current cursor location, and any date or time tokens will be replaced with the date and time according to the format that you set in the Templates Core plugin settings. You can also just insert the date or time in a note by selecting the commands for Insert Current Date or Insert Current Time respectively, but I almost never use these and I prefer to apply templates when I create notes instead. That's the primary way that I use templates in Obsidian. Now there are a couple of ways to do that, but one of the most common ways is when you create a new daily note. So to do this, you must have the Daily Notes Core plugin toggled on also. Then once you do, you can go to the Daily Notes plugin settings and set the template file location for the specific template that you want to use when a new daily note gets created. My daily note template is fairly complex and it has a bunch of different sections that get formatted using date variables, including a section for my daily Bible readings, the tasks that are due today, even a section at the bottom which shows all the other daily notes for that specific day from previous years in a custom bases view. Now, if you want to see how I set that particular piece up, I have a separate video which walks through the whole thing here, as well as another video on the Memento Mori section, which calculates how much of my life has been spent based on the average 80-year lifespan, an idea I picked up from Oliver Burkeman's excellent book, 4,000 Weeks. But the important thing for this video is to realize that this template right here, which right now is returning a bunch of errors because Obsidian doesn't know how to process those date tokens, gets applied correctly when I create a new daily note, as all those date tokens get replaced with the date of the daily note that I just created. Now, one other thing that's worth calling out in my daily notes template here is that there are a bunch of properties that get added on the top of the note. Now, I did a video on properties. If you want to dive deeper into how those work, you can find that here. But all of these properties at the top of the note are actually just plain text that appears at the top of the note in between two sets of 3 dashes. So if you want to add properties to a note, you can just put this section and whatever properties you want to use in between these 3 dashes at the top of your note template. So if you're creating a new note from scratch, templates are a great way to make sure that that same metadata gets applied in the same way to every single note that you create. By using a template for my daily note, I can make sure these properties get added 100% of the time and they're always formatted the same way. But you can also apply a template to an existing note and Obsidian will actually merge any properties that exist in your note with the properties in the template that you just applied. So this creates some interesting possibilities for how you might choose to structure your template files. For example, a few people in my PKM community, the library, actually have a bunch of template files which are just property metadata. And what this does is it allows them to create a new note and apply multiple template files if they want to add all of that metadata that they might want to that active note. So if you have a ton of metadata that you use throughout your notes, you might want to take this approach as well. Just keep in mind that if there's any text in the template file that is not in the property metadata section, it does not get merged and it instead gets added at the place in the active note where you ran the insert template command. So that's a daily note template, but it only applies to daily notes, which for me all exist inside of my daily notes folder. But you can apply this same type of template automation with other folders in your Vault using the Templater community plugin. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not gonna go too deep into Templater. There's a whole bunch of additional tokens and variables that you can use in your template files. But the main way that I use Templater, honestly, is these folder templates. These are great. I have about a dozen different folders, which will automatically apply a specific template when a new note gets created inside of that target folder. So to set this up, go find the Templater plugin in the community plugins directory, click install, then enable, then make sure that trigger Templater on new file creation is toggled on, as is enable folder templates. So this will allow Templater to check and see if there's a folder template set whenever a new note is created inside of a folder in Obsidian. Then you can just click the add new folder template option to create a new folder template. Now the first thing you need to do is set the folder that you want to apply the folder template to, which is the folder that you will create a new note in when you want the template to be applied. Next, you need to pick the specific template file that you want to get applied when a new note gets created inside of that target folder. So in my Vault, I have several of these set up already. For example, if I create a new note in the video scripts folder, my video script template file gets applied to the note. Same thing with newsletters, which get created inside the newsletters folders, and articles that get created inside of the articles folder. Now, each of these template files is unique, having specific metadata that I use for that type of note, and separate sections in the note itself where appropriate. Another example of a folder template that I have here is my personal retreat template, which gets applied every time I create a new note inside of my personal retreats folder. If you want to know more about personal retreats, I have a whole separate video on that. The link will be in the description below this video. But this is also connected to the periodic notes plugin, which allows me to set a specific folder location and template file for the other types of periodic notes that I have in my Vault, like weekly notes, monthly notes, quarterly notes, and even yearly notes. So in this case, I have my quarterly notes set up to be created in the personal retreats folder, and I use the personal retreat template file specifically. So this folder template is actually just a fallback in case I create the new quarterly note in the folder by hand instead of with the command via the command palette that the plugin enables. Same thing with this book notes template here, which actually gets triggered 99% of the time via the book search plugin as part of my book note-taking workflow, which I talked about in this video here. And you might be wondering, why am I even mentioning these if I don't use folder templates for these specific templates most of the time? It's because, as I mentioned before, one of the things that templates gives you is the ability to make sure that things get created the same way every single time. So one of the ways that folder templates can actually be really useful is as a safety net like this to make sure that that actually happens. So it may not seem like a big deal, but this actually hits on an important point when it comes to automation. You want to make things as bulletproof as possible. And generally that means that you should keep things simple whenever you can, but folder templates are a pretty easy way to help make sure that nothing ever falls through the cracks. Now, one other thing I want to cover here before we wrap up is the use of value tokens in template files that get applied when using QuickAdd. This is going to get a little bit nerdy, but it's really powerful, so I want to briefly touch on it here. Now, the example I want to use is actually from my People Note template file, and this is included in LifeHQ, my epic done for you Obsidian Vault. LifeHQ has all the plugins pre-installed, all the settings pre-configured, so you can just start using it out of the box, and there's 60,000 words of documentation that explain everything if you want to tweak it for yourself. But I actually did a whole video on my People Note here if you want to dive deeper into this specific workflow. For this video though, I just want to show you the QuickAdd command and the template file itself. So let's start with the template file, which as you can see has a couple of tokens here that look a little bit different than anything that we've looked at so far. So first, there's a token under the tags here with double brackets value : tag. What this does is allow you to replace this particular token via a modal pop-up window when the template gets applied via QuickAdd with the tag that you want to use. So if you just add this template to a new note using the templates core plugin like I showed you earlier, it's actually just going to add this exact text to the new note. But when you add this via a QuickAdd command, you can actually type a value for this that will be replaced wherever this token appears throughout that new note when the template gets applied. Now there are two other tokens here, which are value first name and value last name. These are going to ask for the first and last name of the person that we are creating the note for, respectively. Now, if we go into the settings, go to the QuickAdd settings, and once a plugin is installed and enabled, then you can configure these macros to use template files when creating a new note. So this People Note macro right here is a template macro, and if we click on the gear icon, we can see how this is configured. Again, I walked through all of this in my People Note video. So here's how this macro is configured, and first I have this set to use the PeopleNote template file inside of my templates folder. Next, I have the name format set up to use the two captured values for the person's first name and last name when creating the file name. So these tokens can be applied to the file name as well as the contents of the note itself. So I've got the template tokens listed here, followed by a .md, which will result in a first name space last name .md file when I run this macro. And then next I have this set to create the file inside of my people folder, and I want to open the file after I've created it to make sure that it did so correctly. Now we can close the settings, make sure that the lightning bolt is toggled on if you want to access this command directly in the command palette, and then you can simply run the macro when you want to add a new people note. So here's what this looks like in action. First, I run the people note command from the command palette, and it asks me for the person's first name. So we'll type that in. Then next it asks for the person's last name. And finally it asks for the tag that I want to use. Now in this case, we want to add that without the hashtag. After that, the macro takes over, creates the note, and all of the queries, which again I walked through setting up in that people note video, are created automatically. Now the really cool part about all of this is that all these queries are instantly updated based on the contents of my notes. So if I use the QuickAdd macro to add a new task to my master task list and I use the appropriate tags, then those tasks will actually show up instantly in these queries that just got created using that PeopleNote template file. So now we've got a note that will show things I need to discuss with this person, the things I'm waiting on him or her to finish, and the tasks that he or she is working on that I want to keep tabs on, as well as giving me a list of all the meeting notes from the meetings that I've attended with this person. But just to reiterate the important point for this video, these values are actually applied in the new note because 1, I use the double curly brackets value token in the template file, and 2, I use the template macro option to create the new file via QuickAdd. Hopefully you can see how powerful this can be if you take a little time to configure this for your specific PKM workflows. Okay, so now I've shared a bunch of different ways to use templates in Obsidian, from the built-in templates core plugin to folder templates with Templater to value tokens with QuickAdd. But before we go, I want to share just a few best practices that will help you get the most out of the templates that you use in your Obsidian Vault. So first, I recommend that you keep all of your templates inside of a single dedicated templates folder. I use a folder named templates in the root of my vault. And I mentioned this when we set up the templates core plugin, but it's worth repeating here. When your templates are scattered all over the place, it's really hard to find and manage them. So keep everything in one folder to make sure that you know where things are when you need them. Second, follow the 3 times rule that I mentioned earlier to identify what templates are actually worth creating. A lot of people try to create templates for everything they can possibly think of, and then they forget to use them, so they do no good. The best templates streamline your everyday workflows. So if you find yourself typing the same thing 3 separate times, that's your signal to stop and create a template. Don't overthink it. Even a simple template with just a couple of headings and a few property values can save you a ton of time over the long run. Third, always put your properties in your template files instead of typing them manually into your notes. A misspelled property name or tag can completely break your queries and make information in your notes difficult or even impossible to find. If the properties are in your templates file, they'll get added correctly to your notes every single time. You never have to worry about typos messing up your note metadata. Fourth, use folder templates as a safety net. I showed you how I have folder templates set up for things like book notes and personal retreats, even though I usually trigger those templates through other plugins. And the reason is simple. You want to make sure that your system is as bulletproof as possible. If for whatever reason you create a note manually instead of using the plugin command, a folder template will catch it and make sure that the right template still gets applied. This is a small thing, but it's the kind of thing that keeps your vault consistent over time. Fifth, start simple and add complexity only when you actually need it. I started this video with the built-in templates core plugin, and honestly, that's all a lot of people will ever need. If you're just getting started, please don't feel like you need to jump straight into Templater and QuickAdd. Start with the basics, and when you hit a limitation in your workflows, like wanting to automatically apply templates based on folders or capture values when a note gets created, that's when you level up to the community plugins that I shared here today. There is no reason to over-engineer things before you actually need to. 6, test your template files after you create them. I showed how my daily note template file actually displays a bunch of errors in the raw template file because Obsidian doesn't know how to process those date tokens until the template actually gets applied. That's normal, but you don't want to create a template, assume that it works, then find out weeks later that something was off. So after you create or update a template, just run it on a test node and make sure that everything resolves the way you expect it to. And finally, revisit your templates from time to time. I mentioned that my newsletter template has been refined over the years that I've been sending it, and that's because templates are not a set it and forget it thing. As your workflow evolves, your templates should too. Maybe you've added a new property that you want to track, or maybe there's a section in the template that you never actually fill out. Feel free to remove that. Every few months, I recommend that you take a few minutes to look through your templates and just see if they still match how you're actually using your vault. A little bit of maintenance like this is gonna go a long way towards removing the friction in your PKM workflows. All right, so that'll do it for this video on templates. I shared lots of template examples today. Just a reminder, if you want these template files for yourself, they are all inside of my free Obsidian Starter Vault. The Starter Vault also has a bunch of other tips and resources to help you get more out of your notes and ideas in Obsidian. You can download it for free right now by going to vault.practicalpkm.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in another video.